Hello there, stay a while and listen. Tonight, we embark on a journey into the harsh, cold world of the Vikings, a time where survival was not just about bravery or skill in battle, but also about withstanding the unforgiving cold, enduring hardship, and enduring constant challenges that tested both body and spirit. Imagine, if you will, the struggle of living day to day as a Viking facing the elements, the violence, and the demands of an existence that seems unimaginable to us today. Before we begin, I invite you to settle in, perhaps dim the lights, or get comfortable in your favorite chair. Let the rhythm of my words guide you into a world where the past echoes with resilience and survival. Feel the warmth of your surroundings as we step into the frozen lands of the Vikings together. As we explore this tale, we'll examine the daily realities of Viking life, both physical and emotional. Would your body have been able to withstand the constant strain? Could your spirit endure the harshness of a world without the comforts we take for granted today? Now, let us begin, and may the story soothe your mind as it carries you into a moment of reflection. As you stand in the middle of the Viking settlement, a hush blankets the land. The bitter chill of a northern winter bites into your skin, its icy fingers creeping beneath the thick layers of woolen tunic and leather boots. The snow lies in unbroken sheets, gleaming under the weak winter sun. Your breath escapes invisible clouds, dissolving into the cold air. You can feel the frost on your eyelashes, and your skin tingles from the biting winds. You are no stranger to this cold. It's a constant companion in this northern world, where the days are short and the nights stretch on endlessly. The Vikings have learned to coexist with the unrelenting cold, to adapt their bodies and minds to a rhythm dictated by the seasons. But even so, each winter presents a challenge, an endurance test of both the body and spirit. The longhouse in front of you, the heart of Viking life, offers the only respite from the harshness outside. You enter and immediately feel the contrast between the inside and the frozen world beyond. The warmth of the hearth greets you like an old friend. The fire crackles, casting flickering shadows across the rough-hewn wooden walls. The heat from the flames is a welcome relief from the chill, but it is not enough to erase the cold completely. You can still feel the cold creeping up your spine, the dampness of the air that clings to the walls, making it impossible for any fire to fully banish the icy grasp of winter. Around the fire, several families sit in quiet conversation. They are wrapped in furs and wool, their eyes glinting with the reflection of the flames. The fire is the centerpiece of Viking life, where they gather to cook, to tell stories, to bond, and to seek warmth. The scent of burning wood fills the air, mixing with the earthy smell of damp fur and the faint odor of roasting meat. The warmth from the fire reaches your face, but your feet are still cold, a constant reminder that comfort is fleeting in this world. The longhouse is built to withstand the elements, but it is not immune to the cold. The walls, made of timber and earth, are thick but not insulated like modern homes. Between the cracks in the wood, a draft makes its way in. Every now and then, you feel a cold breeze tickle the back of your neck. The Vikings did what they could to weatherproof their homes, laying down animal hides over the floors to absorb moisture and keep the chill at bay, but nothing can completely guard against the severity of the northern winters. The heavy furs draped over your shoulders offer some warmth, but they are more than just protection against the cold. These furs are carefully chosen, sometimes earned, representing your connection to the land and your survival in a harsh environment. Food is a crucial part of surviving the winter. The Vikings relied on what they could hunt, fish, or grow in the short summers, and that means the long winter months are often lean. As you sit by the fire, you can smell the simmering stew in the pot, meat, vegetables, and grains cooked slowly over the flames. You have grown used to this simple fare, which changes little from day to day, but it is sustenance. This is what keeps you going, day after day. The meat, often salted or dried to preserve it, is a luxury in the dead of winter. But today, there is a rare treat, a small roasted game bird. The rich, gamey scent fills the air, mixing with the smoke from the fire. Your stomach growls in anticipation. The simple act of eating becomes a shared ritual. The food is passed around, everyone taking their portion before returning to their quiet, solitary reflections. There is little chatter, everyone is lost in the routines that define Viking life, the daily struggles that are the backdrop of everything. Even the most mundane task, like eating, is a reminder that survival is not guaranteed. Every Viking in this room has learned to endure the harsh realities of life. The elder, sitting by the fire, tells stories of the old days when the land was wilder, when raids brought both wealth and peril. He speaks of long voyages across the sea, of distant lands and strange people. His tales seem like fantasies beyond the reach of your own life, but they are rooted in the Viking spirit. The spirit of endurance, of conquering what others might think impossible. After the meal, there are the usual chores, tending to the animals, repairing the boats and weapons, mending clothes. The Viking way of life is deeply practical. There is little time for luxury or idleness. The women might be busy spinning wool, sewing clothes, or preparing hides for tanning. The men work on sharpening their axes or fixing the wooden frames of their longships, getting them ready for the spring raids. These ships, sturdy and swift, are the lifeblood of Viking exploration. Without them, they would be nothing more than farmers bound to the land. But it is the call of the sea that stirs the soul of every Viking. You long for the day when the frost begins to break, when the days grow longer and the seas become navigable again. The anticipation builds as the winter drags on. The men and women of the settlement are hardened by the trials of winter, but they know that there is always something more beyond the horizon, a new land to explore, a new battle to fight, a new fortune to seek. The emotional toll of Viking life cannot be overlooked. It is not just about the cold or the violence. It is about the constant mental strain of living in such a relentless world. There is the tension between fear and courage, the knowing that every journey could be your last, that the next battle may be your final one, the fear of dying in a foreign land, away from your family, or the anxiety of what might happen when you are far from home. There is also the crushing isolation. The Viking world was not a bustling metropolis, but rather small, tight-knit communities, isolated from one another by vast expanses of wilderness. Your family might live miles away from the nearest settlement. News travels slowly, and messages are often sent by messenger birds or runners. You might go for days without seeing anyone except your family, and when you do see another Viking, there is always a sense of wariness, of testing the other's strength and character. Vikings were not just warriors in battle, but also guardians of their emotional world. The bonds of family and community were essential for mental survival. Despite the hardships, there is a sense of purpose. You are not alone in this struggle. The shared experience of living through winter, of facing the elements, of enduring the cold and the hunger, binds you to your fellow Vikings. Your life is not about individual glory or luxury. It is about survival, about enduring together, and about the unspoken understanding that your strength lies in the collective effort. Imagine, then, the weight of the Viking psyche. This is a life where every day is a battle against the elements, where physical pain becomes a routine, and where the emotional weight of isolation and fear is carried not just by the warriors, but by everyone. In a world where even the smallest weakness can spell disaster, your mental and physical endurance becomes a badge of honor. So, we must ask, could we, in our comfortable, modern world, endure what the Vikings did? Could we survive the harsh winters, the violent raids, the constant mental toll of uncertainty? How would we fare if we were thrust into that unforgiving world? Before we move on to explore the spiritual and cultural aspects of Viking life, take a moment to reflect. The Vikings endured, and in their endurance, they became legends. Perhaps, just perhaps, there is a lesson to be learned from their resilience that can carry us through our own daily struggles. If you find comfort in this story and wish to hear more, perhaps subscribing will bring you another night of soothing tales. Woven from history and filled with the wisdom of ages, the wizard will bless you with a peaceful sleep, filled with dreams of distant lands and ancient times. In the next segment, we will dive deeper into the spiritual beliefs and cultural practices of the Vikings, and how their faith and traditions helped them endure these harsh physical and emotional realities. But for now, let the Viking world rest in your mind and reflect on the resilience required to survive such a life. Now that we've explored the physical and emotional toll of Viking life, we turn to another integral part of their existence: the deeply rooted spirituality and cultural traditions that shaped their identity in the harsh, unforgiving environment they inhabited. Faith became a refuge, a framework that helped them interpret the world around them, endure suffering, and find purpose. It was their religion, their myths, and their rituals that provided both solace and strength, uniting them against the hardships they faced every day. As the wind howls outside, filling the longhouse with the sharp sound of icy gusts, you take a seat by the fire, where shadows flicker across the walls. The warmth of the flames contrasts with the cold that wraps around the settlement, and for a brief moment, you can imagine yourself back in a Viking world that thrives on belief and tradition. Every piece of wood in the fire tells a story, each crackling ember a reminder of the cycle of life and death. The Viking faith was deeply tied to nature, its cycles, its seasons, and its ever-changing patterns. The gods and goddesses they worshipped were reflections of these forces, representing power, chaos, and the promise of life and death. At the center of Viking spirituality were the Aesir, two powerful groups of gods, each embodying different elements of the Viking worldview. There's Odin, the All-Father, who presided over war, wisdom, and death. He was a god who sacrificed much for knowledge, even giving up one of his own eyes in exchange for wisdom. To the Viking warriors, Odin was the ultimate figure, both a god of battle and a figure of sacrifice. It is no surprise that the Vikings believed that those who died honorably in battle were chosen by Odin to enter Valhalla, his great hall of warriors. Valhalla was a place of eternal glory where the greatest Viking warriors would feast, fight, and prepare for the final battle of Ragnarok, end of the world. You can almost feel the weight of this belief. Imagine the Vikings, who went into battle not only to protect their land and families, but with the knowledge that dying in combat might be their ticket to the eternal hall of Val. There was a sense of honor, even in death, that transcended the fear of the unknown. The promise of an afterlife filled with feasts and endless combat must have been an incredibly comforting thought to warriors, whose lives were defined by violence and survival. But it was not just the gods of war who captured the Viking imagination. There were also the Vanir, a group of gods associated with fertility, prosperity, and nature. Among them, Freya and Freya were the most important. Freya, the god of harvests and peace, was a figure that brought balance to the often chaotic life of a Viking. His sister, Freya, was the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility, a figure who embodied the Viking appreciation for both physical strength and the softer, nurturing aspects of life. The balance between the Aesir and Vanir gods reflected the Viking understanding of the world, a place where war and peace, life and death, were not opposites, but two sides of the same coin. As you sit by the hearth, you can almost hear the chanting of Viking priests, calling upon the gods for protection, strength, and guidance. These rituals were deeply ingrained in everyday life. There were sacrifices made to the gods, sometimes animals, sometimes even humans offered in hopes of gaining favor or ensuring a successful harvest, a good raiding season, or victory in battle. The Vikings were pragmatic in their faith. Their gods were not abstract beings in the sky, but powerful forces who could directly affect their lives. The gods were present in everything: the winds, the trees, the oceans, and even in the very hands of the warriors who fought for their survival. But this spirituality was not reserved for just the warriors. Women, too, played a significant role in Viking culture. They were the keepers of the home, and their role was vital for the survival of the community. The rituals they performed often focused on the gods of fertility, and the seasons were equally as important as the warriors' sacrifices. It was through these daily practices and beliefs that the Vikings found a sense of community and purpose, even in the darkest of winters. In the longhouse, as the fire crackles and the cold wind howls outside, imagine how this belief system would permeate every part of Viking life. From the construction of their homes to the way they prepared for battle, everything was infused with a deep reverence for the gods. The Vikings did not simply survive the cold and the violence of their world, they did so with the conviction that they were part of something much larger, something eternal. Every battle fought, every sacrifice made, was seen as a way of fulfilling their destiny in the grand tapestry of the cosmos. You can picture the warriors before a raid, preparing not just their weapons, but their hearts and minds. There would be chants, offerings, and prayers to the gods, hoping for their favor in the coming battle. Before heading off on a journey, whether it was for a raid or to explore new lands, a Viking would offer a prayer to Thor, the thunder god, to protect them from danger. Thor's hammer was both a symbol of strength and a talisman for protection. His thunderous presence was a reminder that the gods were always watching, always intervening in the lives of men. As we shift from the gods to the everyday practices of Viking culture, it's clear that their spirituality was not confined to rituals alone. It shaped their entire existence. Even in the most mundane tasks, the presence of the divine could be felt. When the women of the Longhouse spun wool, they did so with an unspoken understanding that the work was not just about creating clothing, but about maintaining the well-being of the entire community. When the men crafted their longships, they knew they were building more than just boats. They were constructing vessels that would carry them across the seas to new lands, guided by the will of the gods. Let us pause for a moment. As you sit by the fire, wrapped in the warmth of the Viking world, perhaps you find comfort in the way they fused the sacred and the practical, the cold and the warm, the harsh and the tender. This balance is something we can learn from, isn't it? Just as the Vikings found meaning in the rhythms of nature and the guidance of their gods, we, too, can find purpose in the small rituals and practices of our own lives. If you're enjoying this journey into Viking culture, I invite you to subscribe. By doing so, the wizard will bless you with another soothing tale, ready to carry you into peaceful sleep. The Viking world has many more lessons to offer, tales of gods, warriors, and everyday heroes who shaped their fate with faith, resilience, and community. The crackle of the fire continues in the background as the winds howl outside the longhouse. Snow piles up on the earth, and the land stretches out in an endless white, broken only by the silhouettes of trees swaying in the wind. The Vikings, no strangers to such a world, have created their own universe within this harsh environment. Inside their longhouses, their faith and culture are interwoven, shaping every aspect of their existence. It's not just a way of surviving the cold and the violent world outside. It's a way of understanding it, a philosophy of living that sees every act, whether mundane or extraordinary, as connected to the divine. As you sit near the fire, the warmth from the hearth pushing back the cold, you begin to reflect on the deep connection between the Vikings and their gods. The Vikings, who lived in a world where death was ever present, understood their lives as part of a greater cosmic struggle. The gods, both male and female, did not sit on distant thrones in some faraway heaven, detached from human struggles. No, these gods were deeply involved in the everyday lives of the Vikings, shaping their fate, protecting them in battle, and guiding them through the long, harsh winters. The Viking belief system was polytheistic, populated by a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each of whom represented different facets of Viking life. Among the most revered were Odin, Thor, and Freyja, one embodying a critical aspect of Viking existence: war, protection, fertility, and prosperity. But the spirituality of the Vikings extended beyond their worship of these gods. It was a worldview where every rock, tree, and wind was seen as imbued with divine energy. The natural world was never separate from the sacred. It was a living entity, constantly shifting and changing, and thus deserving of reverence. Odin, the All-Father of all the gods, Odin was perhaps the most powerful and complex. Known as the All-Father, he was not just a god of war, but of wisdom and sacrifice. Odin, a god who ruled over the battlefield, was also a god who had sacrificed greatly for knowledge. One of the most famous stories surrounding Odin is that of his sacrifice to gain the wisdom of the runes. He hung himself from the world tree, pierced by his own spear, offering himself in sacrifice to himself. This self-inflicted torment was his price for the knowledge that would grant him mastery over the rune symbols that held the power to shape the world itself. Imagine the devotion it would take to follow a god like Odin. He was not just a figure to be worshipped from afar. He was a god who demanded everything. To the Vikings, this sacrifice was not only a tale of divine intervention, but a model of their own lives. The warriors, who lived with a constant threat of death, saw in Odin's story a reflection of their own understanding of life. That to live fully was to risk everything. There was no glory without sacrifice. Odin was a god who embodied the harshness of the world they lived in. He ruled over Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain, where those who died in battle were taken to feast and prepare for the final, cataclysmic battle of Ragnarok. Every Viking warrior knew that death in battle was the most honorable way to go. There was a belief that to be chosen by Odin was the ultimate blessing. Imagine the mental fortitude this belief gave the Vikings, facing the brutal realities of their world, where death could come in an instant. The notion that they would join Odin in Valhalla gave them a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. Their courage was driven by the promise of an afterlife where they could fight forever, a reward for their valor and sacrifice. Thor, the thunder god, while Odin was the god of wisdom and death, Thor was the god of protection and thunder. He was a figure the Vikings could rely on in their daily battles with the elements. Thor was seen as the protector of both gods and humans, wielding his hammer to ward off giants and other chaotic forces that threatened the order of the world. For the Vikings, who lived in constant fear of invasions and raids, Thor's presence was a source of great comfort. His hammer, Mjolnir, was not just a weapon. It was a symbol of strength, protection, and security. It was believed that wearing an amulet shaped like Thor's hammer could protect you from harm. Warriors would go into battle with the belief that Thor's power was behind them, protecting them from death and destruction. In Viking culture, Thor was not just a figure of myth, but a powerful, ever-present force. You could almost feel the rumble of his thunder whenever the storm winds howled through the trees, as if Thor himself was standing watch over the Vikings, his hammer ready to strike down any threat. Freya, the goddess of fertility and love. But while the gods of war and battle were critical to the Viking way of life, it was equally important to honor the deities that governed peace, love, and fertility. Freya, the goddess of fertility, beauty, and love, represented these softer elements, but she was by no means a lesser deity. She had her own powerful attributes, often associated with magic and prophecy. Freya's tears were said to turn into gold, symbolizing both the nurturing and transformative power of life. Freya's significance can't be overstated, especially considering the Viking respect for the dual nature of existence. She embodied both the physical beauty of life and the spiritual depth that was necessary for survival. To the Vikings, she represented the fertility of the land and the prosperity that came with it. Her presence ensured the growth of crops, the fertility of animals, and the continuation of life. Freya, the goddess of fertility and love. But while the gods of war and battle were critical to the Viking way of life, it was equally important to honor the deities that governed peace, love, and fertility. Freya, the goddess of fertility, beauty, and love, represented these softer elements, but she was by no means a lesser deity. She had her own powerful attributes, often associated with magic and prophecy. Freya's tears were said to turn into gold, symbolizing both the nurturing and transformative power of life. Freya's significance can't be overstated, especially considering the Viking respect for the dual nature of existence. She embodied both the physical beauty of life and the spiritual depth that was necessary for survival. To the Vikings, she represented the fertility of the land and the prosperity that came with it. Her presence ensured the growth of crops, the fertility of animals, and the continuation of life. The sacred rituals of Viking life, the Vikings' connection with their gods, wasn't just through stories. It was through ritual. These rituals were not confined to grand temples or formal places of worship. These were acts woven into daily life, occurring in the heart of the community. Every Viking home, every settlement, every gathering was a place of sacred activity. The sacrifices were central to Viking religious practice. These sacrifices, often of animals, but sometimes of humans, were made to ensure the favor of the gods. The Vikings believed that the gods' favor was essential for success in life and battle. These ceremonies were not only about appeasing the gods, but were also an opportunity to bond with the divine. As part of these rituals, a priest or seer would recite prayers and make offerings to Odin, Thor, and Freya, calling upon them for protection, guidance, and strength. These sacred rituals were marked by feasts and songs, where the Vikings would express their gratitude and hopes for future successes. The cider magic, practiced by women called Valvas, was another important aspect of Viking spirituality. These women were seers and spellcasters who could commune with the gods and spirits. They used ritual to predict the future, guide Viking leaders, and even influence the outcomes of battles. The practice of cider was an expression of the Viking worldview, one that blended the supernatural with the everyday. The belief in fate was central to their religion. Every Viking understood that their life was shaped by the gods, their destiny already written, but still shaped by their actions. This made every day a test of courage, wisdom, and honor, for to live in a world guided by fate meant living with constant awareness of the forces beyond one's control. The role of the community. Viking faith also played a central role in the structure of Viking society. The community was bound together by their shared beliefs and rituals. The longhouse itself, a symbol of the Viking way of life, was more than just a home. It was a sacred space. Families lived, ate, and slept in these longhouses, and many of their most important rituals were performed within the hearth's light. This connection between the sacred and the everyday made the Vikings' daily lives rich with purpose and meaning. As we reflect on the role of faith in Viking culture, consider how the Vikings found not only physical strength in their gods, but emotional and spiritual fortitude as well. Their beliefs were a means of understanding their world and giving their lives meaning in the face of unrelenting violence, uncertainty, and hardship. Before we continue, take a moment to reflect on how the Viking faith permeated every action, every battle, every harvest, every storm. Would your life feel richer if you had such a deep connection to the world around you, to the gods that shaped your destiny? If you find comfort in this Viking journey, perhaps you'll consider subscribing. With each tale, the wizard will bless you with restful sleep, and you'll have more stories to fill your nights with the strength and wisdom of the Vikings. As the flickering shadows dance along the walls of the longhouse, the fire's warmth is a comforting reminder of the Vikings' connection to both their gods and each other. The rituals, the beliefs, and the unwavering faith that defined their culture were not merely abstract ideas, they were lived experiences, present in every action, in every corner of their world. The sacred and the mundane were inseparable. The Vikings did not just believe in the gods, they acted with them, in them, and through them. The Viking code of honor. In the world of the Vikings, no one was ever truly alone. While solitude did exist in the harsh, cold corners of their world, the Viking mindset was deeply rooted in community. Your worth wasn't just based on your physical prowess or your ability to survive the cold. It was about your connection to the people around you. This connection was fostered through loyalty, respect, and a deep, often unspoken, understanding of the roles everyone played within the group. The Viking code of honor was crucial in maintaining this social cohesion. In the Viking world, honor was everything. It was not just about individual glory, but about the shared sense of duty and the unwavering loyalty to one's community. The Vikings lived by a warrior ethos that held honor above all else. To bring shame upon oneself or one's family was a fate worse than death. This ethos defined their actions, both on and off the battlefield. The role of the jarls, carls, and thralls. Viking society was organized into a three-tiered structure, each with its own duties, privileges, and responsibilities. At the top of the social ladder were the jarls, noble chieftains, or warlords who held power and land. These were the leaders who commanded respect, not just through birthright, but through their ability to lead in battle, to wield influence, and to protect their people. They were the embodiments of the warrior ideal, brave, wise, and strategic. They ruled with an iron fist, but understood that their power was ultimately dependent on the loyalty of those beneath them. The carls, or free men, formed the backbone of Viking society. They were the farmers, the craftsmen, the warriors, and the traders. Every carl had a role to play in the survival of the community. Their lives were a constant balancing act between the harsh demands of survival, tending to crops, hunting, building, and the ever-present threat of raids, both from other Viking clans and foreign enemies. For the carls, life was about honor, loyalty to their leaders, and respect for the unspoken laws of Viking society. At the bottom of the social hierarchy were the thralls, or slaves. These individuals were often captured during raids, or born into servitude. While their lives were dictated by the will of their masters, the thralls were still a part of Viking society. They did the most labor-intensive work, tending to animals, working the fields, maintaining the longhouses, but they also had a place in the social fabric. Despite their lower status, Thralls could earn their freedom, marry, and even become respected members of the community over time. The role of women. The powerful pillars of Viking society, women in Viking culture, despite being somewhat restricted by societal norms, held significant power and influence in their communities. Their roles were vital for the continuity of the Viking way of life. And in many ways, women were the quiet architects of Viking resilience. The women of the Viking world were not mere bystanders. They were the ones who kept the home fires burning, literally and figuratively. As you sit in the longhouse, imagine the women gathering around the fire, preparing food, spinning wool, and weaving intricate tapestries. These were not simply household tasks. They were acts of cultural preservation. The intricate patterns woven into their textiles were more than just decoration. They told stories. They preserved history. Through their work, the women ensured that the Viking legacy would continue to be passed down through generations. Women were also deeply connected to the spiritual and mystical aspects of Viking life. Many women practiced cider magican, ancient form of Norse shamanism that involved communication with the gods, divination, and ritual magic. The Valvas women who held this sacred knowledge were highly respected and sometimes even feared. They were the seers, the healers, the wise women who could look into the future or call upon the gods to aid in battle. These women had the ability to influence the fate of not just individuals but entire communities, and their power was seen as an essential part of Viking society. Imagine the sense of awe and reverence that these women must have inspired. Their role was not just to raise children or manage the home, but to actively participate in the spiritual life of the Viking community, shaping the destiny of the people. Rituals, feasts, and the importance of storytelling. Rituals and feasts were an integral part of Viking society. The Vikings believed that to live a full life, they had to honor the gods, their ancestors, and each other. Feasts, often held in the longhouses after a successful raid or during a seasonal change, were not just about eating, they were about storytelling, about marking the passing of time, and about connecting with the divine. At the heart of these feasts was the skald, the Viking poet and storyteller. The skalds played a crucial role in preserving Viking history and culture, for it was through their songs and tales that the exploits of the gods, heroes, and warriors were passed down. The Vikings didn't write down their stories as we do. Instead, they sang them, recited them, and passed them along orally. In this way, each Viking man, woman, and child could participate in the collective memory of their people. Imagine yourself at one of these feasts, sitting around the fire, listening to the skald weave tales of gods, kings, and warriors. The air is thick with the scent of roasted meats, and the warmth of the fire pulses against your skin. The sound of laughter and chatter fills the room as people from all walks of life come together to celebrate and share their stories. You can hear the voice of the skald rising above the din, his words painting vivid images of past glories and future hopes. The songs, passed down from generation to generation, are a powerful reminder of who the Vikings were, what they valued, and what they were willing to fight for. These feasts were not just for the gods or warriors. They were for the community. Each person played a part in the celebrations, from the youngest children who would dance and sing, to the elders who would recount the ancient tales. The rituals performed during these feasts were designed to foster unity and remind everyone of their place in the larger cosmic order. Viking law, justice, and the Thing. The Vikings also had a system of law known as the Thing, which was central to their way of life. The Thing was not just a place where disputes were settled, it was the very heartbeat of Viking democracy. Every free man had the right to attend the Thing and speak his mind. It was a gathering of the people where laws were made, disputes were settled, and justice was meted out. Imagine the scene. A group of Vikings, gathered in a large open field, or a central meeting place, where voices rise in debate. The leader, perhaps a jarl, stands to address the crowd, calling for the next issue to be discussed. Disputes over land, inheritance, and even personal grievances are brought before the assembly. The resolution isn't always as simple as we might imagine it. Often involves negotiation, compromise, and the wisdom of the elders. The thing was an essential part of Viking life, offering a rare glimpse into their sense of justice and community. There was no police force in Viking society. Justice was delivered by the people themselves, and punishments could range from fines to exile or, in extreme cases, death. But the law wasn't just about punishment. It was about maintaining balance and ensuring that everyone knew their role and respected the social order. As you sit in the warmth of the longhouse, listening to the crackling of the fire, you begin to realize that the Viking world was not just about fighting, raiding, and surviving. It was about living with a profound connection to the world around you, both the seen and the unseen. Their spirituality, their social codes, and their sense of community were all intricately woven into the fabric of daily life. Every action had meaning, every interaction was guided by respect, and every victory, whether in battle or in life, was a testament to their resilience and unity. The Vikings' understanding of the world was defined by their belief in fate and the gods, but also by their fierce commitment to each other. In this world of cold winds and endless battles, it was the bonds of faith, family, and loyalty that truly defined them. If you've found comfort in these stories, perhaps you'd like to join me again. Subscribing will bless you with more tales like this, carrying you into a world of strength, wisdom, and timeless resilience. In the next segment, we will explore the contrasting lives within Viking society: the warriors, the farmers, the craftsmen, and the slaves, offering a deeper look at how their roles and experiences varied. Stay with me as we continue to unravel the fascinating, multifaceted lives of the Vikings. As we transition deeper into the world of the Vikings, we shift our focus from the spiritual and cultural to the more practical and social aspects of their daily lives. We've already explored the gods they worshipped, the faith that guided them, and the overarching principles of honor, duty, and loyalty that shaped their lives. Now, we delve into the layers of Viking society, how different roles within the community shape their lives, their challenges, and their relationships with one another. Viking society, while unified by a common faith and a shared sense of honor, was also highly stratified, with distinct roles for different members. From the elite jarls to the common carls to the enslaved thralls, each person had a role to play, and their position dictated both their daily experiences and their opportunities in life. This social structure, though rigid, allowed for movement between ranks, depending on circumstances, and in many cases, individuals could transcend their given status if they had the strength, ambition, or luck to do so. As we journey deeper into Viking society, we find ourselves contemplating the stark contrasts that existed between the different classes within the Viking world. While the bond of shared faith, culture, and honor was a strong unifying force, the lives of the jarls, carls, and thralls were vastly different, and these differences shaped their experiences, struggles, and interactions with one another. Understanding these societal layers gives us not only a glimpse into the Viking world, but also a deeper appreciation of the resilience that permeated every level of Viking life. The Jarl, the elite leader and warrior. Imagine yourself in the presence of a Jarl, grander than the homes of the carls or thralls, with thick, high walls built to protect him and his family. The floor of his hall is covered in furs and thick woolen tapestries, rich with the warmth of the fire, and the air smells of roasting meats and roasting peat. The Jarl is not just a warrior, but a leader. His role is vital for the survival of his people, and his day is filled with challenges that go beyond the battlefield. The Jarl spends much of his time managing the affairs of his people, whether it be organizing defenses, negotiating with neighboring Jarls, or ensuring the prosperity of his settlement. His presence is commanding. When he speaks, his words carry weight, and his decisions are the foundation on which his people's survival rests. In times of peace, the Jarl is a protector and provider, ensuring that food, supplies, and resources are evenly distributed. In times of war, he is a fearless leader, gathering his warriors and directing them with both cunning and courage. Though the Jarl holds considerable power, his life is far from free from the constant pressures of leadership. In battle, his reputation is everything. If he fails, not only does he risk his own life, but the lives of those under his command. To be a successful Jarl means to possess not just strength and courage, but wisdom and diplomacy. Each decision made, each battle fought, is a test of his leadership ability, and failure in either could mean the end of his reign. There is always the looming possibility of betrayal, both within and outside the settlement, where another ambitious Viking could seek to dethrone him. Despite this, the Jarl's prestige and wealth offer him privileges that others cannot even imagine. His warriors are well fed and well equipped, and his family lives in comfort. He may possess a beautiful wife who manages the domestic affairs of the house, and an array of servants and thralls who tend to the estate. The Jarl's children are groomed for leadership, taught both the art of warfare and the ways of diplomacy, preparing to one day take on the mantle of leadership in their own right. However, the Jarl's position also comes with significant responsibility. A reminder that the luxuries of life in Viking society were often built on a precarious foundation of constant vigilance and unrelenting competition. The Carl, the backbone of Viking society, in stark contrast to the Jarl. The Carl is the everyday Viking, the farmer, the craftsman, the warrior, and the provider. His home is simpler, made of sturdy wood and furnished with practical necessities rather than luxury. Life for the Carl is marked by hard work, whether it's ploughing the fields, repairing boats, or crafting tools. The Vikings, though often romanticized for their seafaring prowess and warrior culture, were also deeply rooted in agriculture and craftsmanship. The Carls were the ones who ensured the survival of the community through their hard labor. Every morning, the Carl wakes with the dawn, the cold air seeping into his home as he rises from beneath his furs. The life of a Carl is one of constant labor. In summer, it's the planting and harvesting of crops. In winter, it's the tending of livestock and the constant preparation for the coming months. The tools of a Carl's trade are practical: axes for woodcutting, sickles for harvesting grain, and spears or swords for defense and hunting. But the Carl is also a warrior. When the call to battle comes, he must leave his fields and take up arms to defend his settlement or join a raid to gain wealth and prestige. Unlike the Jarl, who commands armies, the Carl is expected to fight as a soldier alongside his comrades. The Viking ethos demands that every Carl is a warrior, and this sense of duty to fight, protect, and conquer defines their social status. Even in the midst of this hard work, there is a sense of pride that comes with being a Carl. Their ability to thrive in such a harsh environment, to support their community, and to serve as warriors in times of need is something they hold dear. They may not have the wealth or status of the Jarl, but they are the lifeblood of Viking society. Their strength and determination are what ensure that the settlement continues, that the Jarl's command is carried out, and that the Viking way of life survives. In the evenings, the carls gather around the fire with their families, perhaps sharing a meal of salted meat, bread, and vegetables. They may recount stories of their day, or the latest exploits of the Jarl and his warriors. The sense of community, of shared purpose, binds them together in a way that is essential for survival. The carl's life, though hard, is also rich with meaning, defined by the cyclical nature of work and battle. The thrall, the silent workers of Viking society at the other end of the social spectrum. We have the thralls, the enslaved people who made up a crucial part of Viking society. The thralls were often captured during raids on other lands or born into slavery. Their lives were marked by hardship, but their work was essential to the functioning of Viking settlements. While they had little personal freedom, they performed the labor that kept the Viking world turning. Without them, the Jarls and carls could not have sustained their way of life. The thralls did the most grueling and menial tasks, tending the animals, working the fields, building houses, and even serving in the kitchens of the Jarl's halls. Their days began before the sun rose and lasted long into the night. They had little time for rest, and their lives were constantly shaped by the whims of their masters. However, there were moments of unexpected freedom. A thrall who worked diligently might be granted their freedom, often through their own earnings or through a master's generosity. This was rare, but it did happen. A thrall could become a carl if they were fortunate enough to buy their way out of slavery. Even in this harsh system, there was a path for change, though it was incredibly difficult to achieve. While the thralls had no real power or influence, they were not invisible. Their lives were deeply intertwined with the Viking economy. Their labor made the difference between a successful harvest or a failing one, a well-maintained settlement or a crumbling one. While their status was low, their contributions were indispensable. Women in Viking society. The heart of the household, the role of women in Viking society was complex. While women didn't wield the same military power as men, they were far from powerless. In many ways, women were the backbone of Viking life, managing the household and ensuring its smooth operation. The role of women in the Viking world, particularly in the home, was critical for the survival and prosperity of the family unit. Women in Viking society were skilled at weaving, spinning, and sewing. They were also responsible for managing the food supply, often curing meats, baking bread, and preparing meals. But Viking women did not just work at home. They've played an integral role in the spiritual and mystical practices of their society. Many women were skilled in cider, a form of magic that involved divination, healing, and communicating with the gods. The Valva sorceresses were highly respected, and their ability to predict the future and influence fate was central to Viking culture. In addition to their domestic and mystical roles, some Viking women took on the role of shield maidens, fighting alongside men in battle. While these women were rare, their presence is recorded in sagas and stories. The Viking belief in the importance of honor and bravery allowed women to take part in these traditionally male-dominated activities, offering a glimpse into a more fluid understanding of gender roles compared to other societies of the time. A world in balance. The Viking world was one where the roles of each class, carl, thrall, and women were distinct, yet deeply interconnected. While the Jarls led the raids and managed the settlements, it was the carls who worked the land and fought the battles. The thralls may have been enslaved, but their labor supported the entire structure, and women, though often behind the scenes, kept the hearths burning, ensured the smooth running of the household, and contributed to the spiritual and social cohesion of the community. There was no one in Viking society whose role did not matter. The social structure, while seemingly rigid, allowed for moments of fluidity. A thrall could rise to become a carl. A carl could gain glory and wealth, and a jarl could fall from grace. The Viking world was harsh, but it was also one where the courage, strength, and wisdom of each individual could change the course of their fate. As we sit by the fire, reflecting on the layers of Viking life, we are reminded that the world of the Vikings was a world of contrasts between power and labor, freedom and servitude, luxury and hardship. Yet through all these differences, one thing remains clear: the strength of their community, their bonds of loyalty, and their commitment to survival and honor define them. If you find peace in this understanding of Viking life, consider subscribing. The wizard will bless you with further tales, guiding you through the complexities and contradictions of ancient worlds. In the next segment, we will delve into the mysteries of Viking archaeology, uncovering the artifacts and remnants that tell the untold stories of their lives, their struggles, and their triumphs. Stay with me as we continue this journey of discovery, the harshness of Viking society. While the Vikings were bound together by a shared faith, culture, and code of honor, the differences in their social status shaped vastly different lives. The jarls, with their wealth and status, lived relatively comfortable lives compared to the carls and thralls, whose lives were defined by physical labor and constant survival. Yet even within these rigid structures, the Viking way of life allowed for mobility and change. A thrall could earn their freedom, a carl could rise in status through bravery and skill, and a jarl could fall from power through poor decisions or defeat. The Viking world was a harsh one, where survival was a constant battle. Whether you were a jarl living in a grand longhouse or a thrall working the fields, the demands of Viking life left little room for complacency. Everyone had their role to play, and each person's life was shaped by their ability to endure, fight, and work for the greater good of the community. The sense of unity within Viking society, despite its divisions, was rooted in the shared understanding that survival depended on cooperation, strength, and honor. As you sit in the warmth of the longhouse, surrounded by the sound of crackling firewood and the soft murmur of voices, imagine the complexities of this society. The contrast between the powerful jarls, the hard-working carls, and the subjugated thralls paints a vivid picture of Viking life. It's a world of both brutal hardship and communal strength, where every person, regardless of their status, played a part in the ongoing saga of survival. If this exploration of Viking life resonates with you, and you wish to continue your journey through time, subscribing will bring you further tales and wisdom from the past. The wizard will continue to bless you with stories that guide you to peaceful slumber, all while offering glimpses into the rich, complex world of the Vikings. As the fire crackles and the wind howls outside, imagine yourself sitting in a Viking longhouse, surrounded by the warmth of the hearth. The heat from the flames feels like a cocoon, offering a fleeting sense of safety in the brutal world outside. The flickering shadows cast by the fire reveal the intimate, often harsh reality of Viking life. Here, in this moment of reflection, we explore the intricate layers of Viking society, where social roles and daily life intersect in a complex dance of survival, honor, and tradition. The jarls, the carls, the thralls, and the women, each with their own roles, formed a delicate web of interconnected lives, where the strength of one influenced the survival of all. Let us dive deeper into their daily lives, their challenges, and how their existence played a crucial role in the greater Viking world. Every life, whether noble or humble, carried a story of endurance and pride. Imagine, if you will, a large settlement nestled against the backdrop of the Scandinavian landscape. At the heart of it all stands the Jarl's longhouse, imposing and grand, towering above the homes of the carls and the thralls. The walls of the longhouse are made of thick timber, coated in animal hides to provide insulation against the harsh elements. Inside, the warmth from the hearth radiates, offering comfort against the cold wind that blows relentlessly from the north. The Jarl and his family live in relative luxury, compared to the other members of the society. The Jarl wakes at dawn, his morning filled with responsibilities. As the leader of his clan, he must oversee the training of his warriors, ensure that the settlement's defenses are strong, and make decisions that affect the lives of everyone within his domain. His hall, large and open, is not just a home but a space for holding meetings, hosting feasts, and governing his people, his warriors, who serve both as bodyguards and battle companions, are loyal to him, bound by the honor code that runs deep through Viking society. In the morning, the Jarl meets with his advisors, a small group of trusted men and women who help manage the clan's affairs. These discussions often revolve around matters of war and trade, alliances and disputes. As a leader, the Jarl is constantly balancing diplomacy and aggression. A good Jarl knows how to negotiate with other clans, keeping the peace when necessary, but also how to command a raid or initiate a war when resources are threatened or when the honor of the clan demands it. His warriors, seasoned from many battles, gather at his side to hear the plans for the next raid. Some of these raids are aimed at neighboring tribes, while others venture further afield to distant lands. The Jarl also oversees the distribution of goods and resources. The settlement's food supply is central to Viking survival, especially during the harsh winters when the land is frozen and hunting becomes difficult. It is the Jarl's responsibility to ensure that no one goes hungry, and that the balance between the wealth of the elite and the needs of the common folk is maintained. This task is not an easy one. When a Jarl makes decisions about resource allocation, he must consider the welfare of everyone. For if the people become discontent, his power could be threatened. Though his wealth and status may allow him more comfort and luxury than the common Viking, the Jarl's life is never free from the burdens of leadership. His decisions are constantly scrutinized, both by his people and his rivals. The political landscape of Viking society is constantly shifting, with clans forming alliances, and just as quickly breaking them. If a Jarl fails in battle or neglects his people's needs, his power can swiftly diminish. In a world of such violent uncertainty, no Jarl can afford to be complacent. Moving from the towering presence of the Jarl's longhouse, you enter the world of the carls, the free men of Viking society. The farmers, craftsmen, and warriors who made up the bulk of the population. The carl's home is far more modest, constructed from timber and thatch, though sturdy and practical in design. The fire in the hearth provides warmth, and the scent of burning wood and meat fills the air, signaling the start of another busy day. For the carl, life begins early. His duties are endless. As the sun rises, so does he. Greeted by the cold air as he steps out of his longhouse, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. During the summer, his primary focus is on the land, tending to crops, repairing tools, and ensuring that livestock are cared for. The carl must be skilled in a variety of tasks: farming, woodworking, metalworking, and animal husbandry. Each task is vital to the survival of the clan, and every carl understands that the work he does ensures the well-being of his family and community. But the carl is also a warrior. When the Jarl calls for a raid, the carl picks up his axe, shield, or spear and prepares for battle. Unlike the Jarl, who may lead the raid, the carl is a soldier, fighting in the trenches, risking his life for the glory of his clan. For the carl, being a warrior is not optional, it is expected. Honor in battle, loyalty to the clan, and courage in the face of death define his role in Viking society. The Carl fights not just for survival, but for the honor of his people. The life of the Carl is grueling, and often his personal desires must take a backseat to the needs of his community. When not working the land or fighting in raids, the Carl is expected to contribute in other ways, whether by trading goods, repairing the longhouses, or crafting weapons and tools. His life is a balance between labor and violence, creativity and destruction. Despite this, the Carl holds a respected position in Viking society. He is not a noble, but he is free, and that freedom is something the Carl cherishes. The respect he earns through his bravery in battle and his work ethic is part of what sustains the Viking ethos. Every free man has a duty to contribute to the survival and success of the community. But even the Carl is not immune to the harsh realities of Viking life. The constant pressure to perform, the ever-present danger of raids, and the uncertainty of the changing seasons wear on the Carl's psyche. He is not exempt from the struggle for survival, and his position, while free, is far from comfortable. At the lowest rung of Viking society, we find the thralls, those who were enslaved, captured in battle, or born into servitude. Their lives, marked by hardship, were essential to the functioning of the Viking world. The thralls were typically tasked with performing the most grueling, labor-intensive work. Their days began before sunrise and ended after dark, often without the reprieve of a warm fire or a bed to call their own. The thralls worked in the fields, cared for the animals, and performed household tasks for their masters. They were the invisible backbone of Viking society, making life easier for the Jarls and Carls by doing the work that was too menial or too exhausting for the free members of the community. Imagine, if you will, the thrall waking early in the cold to begin his day, while the Carl and Jarls sleep soundly, their work already done. The thrall's existence was often one of anonymity and hardship, but their labor allowed the Jarls to focus on leadership, and the Carls to focus on their work and warrior duties. Yet, even in their subjugation, the thralls were not completely without hope. Some could eventually buy their freedom through their labor, or receive their freedom from a kind master. The rare opportunity for a thrall to ascend from servitude to freedom was a glimmer of possibility in an otherwise bleak existence. If a thrall earned enough money, they could potentially purchase land, marry, and become a Carl. Though the thralls had little power or autonomy, their lives were tied to the Viking world in ways that were undeniably significant. They were the workers who kept the settlement running without them. The Jarls and Carls would be unable to focus on their roles. Every thrall worked for the survival of the community, and their hard labor was as integral to Viking society as the strength of the warriors or the leadership of the Jarls. While women were often relegated to the domestic sphere in Viking society, their roles were far from trivial. The women of the Viking world were crucial to the functioning of their households and communities. They managed the hearth, cared for the children, and ensured that the family had enough food, clothing, and shelter to survive the brutal winters. Women were also skilled in a variety of crafts. Weaving, spinning, and sewing were essential skills. As the fabric for clothing was often made by hand, the women prepared the food, cured meats, and prepared medicines using herbs and other natural remedies. However, the role of women went beyond household duties. Viking women had the legal right to own property, initiate divorce, and even take part in warfare. Some women were shield maidens, fighting alongside men in battle, wielding swords and axes, and sharing in the glory of victory. Though these women were rare, their presence was a symbol of the fluidity of Viking gender roles. The Viking world, where survival was paramount, allowed for a more flexible approach to gender expectations. If a woman could fight, she fought. If she could lead, she led. In addition to their physical roles, women also played an important part in the spiritual and mystical life of the Vikings. Women known as Valvas were seers, capable of communing with the gods and foretelling the future. Their role in Viking society was one of immense power. They were the spiritual guides, the wise women who shaped the destiny of the people. As we reflect on the daily lives of the jarls, carls, thralls, and women, we begin to see how these different layers of Viking society interacted and supported one another. The jarl's leadership relied on the labor of the carls and the servitude of the thralls, while the carls depended on the jarl's protection and leadership. Women, while integral to the home and the mystical practices, also played a role in shaping the culture and survival of the community. Each class, despite its social rank, carried out crucial tasks that ensured the continuity of Viking society. Whether it was the jarl leading a raid, the carl ploughing the fields, or the thrall working the hearth, every individual contributed to the larger story of survival, honor, and community. As we sit together in the warmth of the fire, reflecting on the complexity of Viking society, we are reminded that no one was truly isolated. Every person, no matter their social standing, had a role to play. Their lives were interconnected by the harsh realities of survival, bound by their shared faith and a collective understanding of honor and duty. If you find peace in this exploration of Viking life, consider subscribing. The Wizard will continue to bless you with more tales, taking you deeper into the hearts and minds of the ancient people. Join me as we journey into the past, discovering the tangible evidence of Viking life and the forgotten stories embedded in the land they once roamed. As we continue our journey into the Viking Age, we step beyond the pages of history and into the realm of archaeology and discovery. The Vikings, whose very name evokes images of warriors, raiders, and explorers, left behind not only sagas and stories, but also a rich and complex material legacy. Their settlements, burial sites, and artifacts offer us glimpses into their lives, their beliefs, and their extraordinary world. In this segment, we will explore the mysteries of Viking archaeology, diving into the discoveries that have allowed us to reconstruct their society and the cultural treasures they left behind. These artifacts, unearthed in the frozen ground of the north or the ruins of distant lands, speak volumes about a civilization that thrived more than 1,000 years ago. These remnants are more than mere objects. They are the echoes of lives lived with honor, courage, and survival at the forefront. The Viking ship. The Viking ship is perhaps the most iconic and lasting symbol of Viking culture. Sleek, fast, and designed for both sea and river, the ships were at the center of Viking life. They weren't just vehicles for transportation. They were a testament to the Vikings' advanced craftsmanship, their engineering ingenuity, and their unyielding desire to explore the world. In the early 20th century, the excavation of the Oseberg ship, a Viking burial ship discovered in Norway, revealed much about the Vikings' shipbuilding skills. This ship, which had been used as a burial vessel for 2 women of high status, was preserved in astonishing detail, measuring over 21 meters long, with intricate carvings of animals and mythological creatures along its sides. The Oseberg ship offers insight into Viking craftsmanship and their cultural emphasis on the afterlife. The ship was not merely a practical vehicle for exploration. It was a sacred object, a means by which the dead could travel to the afterlife. The Vikings believed that ships were essential for both the living and the dead. When a Viking warrior or Hestatus individual died, they were often buried with their ship or buried near water, symbolizing their journey into the afterlife. Ships, in this sense, were bridges between the mortal world and the divine, between the living and the dead. As you imagine yourself standing by the shore of a Viking settlement, the sleek wooden hulls of these ships lined up on the beach, the Vikings would launch their vessels from here, heading out across vast stretches of ocean, making their way toward distant lands. The sight of the longships gliding over the waves, carrying their warriors, their treasures, and their hopes was a reflection of Viking courage and the adventurous spirit that defined them. The technological brilliance of these ships was vital to the Vikings' success. They could sail across the open sea, navigate rivers, and carry cargo or warriors in search of wealth, land, and glory. The ships' shallow drafts allowed them to approach the shore easily, making surprise raids on unsuspecting villagers possible. The speed and agility of the longships gave the Vikings a military advantage over their enemies, allowing them to strike quickly and disappear just as fast. These ships were a lifeline, allowing the Vikings to conquer new lands, form trade routes, and spread their culture far and wide. Viking burials sites, like the one at Os, offer profound insight into Viking spiritual practices and their views on death and the afterlife. The Vikings placed great importance on their burial rituals. For the Viking, death was not an end, but a transition into a new realm, one where honor and bravery continued to define their existence. This belief in an afterlife, particularly the realm of Valhalla, shaped their entire approach to life, including how they prepared for death. In Viking burial sites, we find not only remains, but also grave goodstools, weapons, jewelry, and sometimes even horses or dogs. These items were believed to be necessary for the deceased's journey into the afterlife. In some cases, ships were used as burial chambers, symbolizing the idea that the soul would continue its journey across the seas. These burial rituals reinforced the belief that life after death was just another part of the grand, cyclical existence governed by the gods. A famous burial site, the Birka burial site in Sweden, revealed how Viking leaders were buried with a wide array of goods to ensure their safe passage into the next world. One such grave included a high-ranking warrior, buried with weapons, a shield, and a finely crafted sword. Archaeologists believe that these grave goods were not only symbolic of the deceased's social status, but were also practical in ensuring that the warrior could continue his battle in the afterlife, where he would fight and feast in Valhalla. Perhaps most intriguing are the discoveries of female Viking warriors within these burial sites. In 2017, an archaeological study of a grave in Björk, Sweden, revealed the remains of a woman who had been buried with an array of weapons, including a sword, arrows, and a shield. This discovery sparked a renewed conversation about the possibility of women taking part in Viking raids and warfare, suggesting that the role of women in Viking society may have been far more complex and egalitarian than previously thought. Viking art and culture beyond ships and burial sites. Viking culture is also reflected in their art and the objects they left behind. The Vikings were skilled artisans, and their artwork is found in the intricate carvings on their ships, jewelry, weapons, and even the runnerstones that dotted the Scandinavian landscape. The Vikings used runes, carved symbols, and letters to write messages, commemorate important events, and memorialize the dead. The runestones, scattered across Scandinavia, are stone monuments inscribed with runic text, some of which commemorate Viking warriors who fell in battle or voyages taken. One of the most famous runnerstones is the Jelling Stone in Denmark, which depicts King Harald Bluetooth's unification of Denmark and Norway under the Viking banner. These stones were more than just commemorations. They were symbols of power, legacy, and identity. Jewelry, too, provides a glimpse into Viking culture. Bronze, silver, and gold were used to create elaborate necklaces, rings, and brooches. These pieces often incorporated animal motifs, such as wolves, serpents, and ravens, signifying the Vikings' deep connection to nature and the spiritual world. One of the most iconic items of Viking jewelry is the Thor's hammer pendant, often worn as a talisman for protection in battle or as a sign of devotion to the god Thor. The craftsmanship of these items, with their intricate designs and symbolism, speaks to the cultural richness of Viking society. Art was not just confined to objects. The Vikings also created complex and vivid stories through skaldic poetry. These tales, passed down through generations, celebrated the exploits of gods, warriors, and kings, and were performed at feasts, often accompanied by music. The skalds, poets, and storytellers were central figures in Viking culture. They were not only the preservers of history, but also the cultural glue that bound the Viking world together. They could elevate ordinary events into epic tales and recite the deeds of warriors in a way that would be remembered long after their death. Viking settlements. Archaeological digs in Viking settlements have uncovered not only homes and fortifications, but entire urban systems. Viking towns were designed to be functional and strategically placed. The town of Hedeby, located in modern-day Germany, was one of the largest Viking trading centers. Archaeological digs at Hedeby have revealed a thriving marketplace, workshops for artisans, and evidence of long-distance trade. The Vikings were traders as much as they were warriors, and Hedeby served as a hub for goods that traveled from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean. The Viking world was far-reaching, stretching from North America to the Middle East, with trade routes that connected Scandinavia to places as distant as the Byzantine Empire. This extensive network allowed the Vikings to trade in everything from furs and amber to weapons and slaves. The Vikings didn't just raid and conquered, they traded, explored, and left a legacy of cultural exchange that spanned centuries. The remnants of Viking settlements, longhouses, tools, pottery, and personal belongings offer us glimpses of the daily lives of these ancient people. While much of their world was shaped by the cold and harsh environment, their settlements were places of ingenuity, and even early forms of urban planning flourished. The Viking legacy. Through archaeology, we continue to uncover the extraordinary world of the Vikings. Their art, their weapons, their ships, and their buildings paint a picture of a society that was not just about conquest and war, but about survival, trade, culture, and spirituality. These artifacts remind us that the Vikings were not just warriors, they were builders, traders, and storytellers, leaving behind a cultural legacy that continues to fascinate and inspire. As we reflect on these discoveries, we are reminded that the Vikings were far more than the myths and legends that have been passed down through the centuries. They were a people who carved their existence into the very land they inhabited, creating a legacy that continues to be uncovered, one artifact at a time. If you've enjoyed this journey through the mysteries of Viking culture, perhaps subscribing will bring you more stories from the past, each one carrying the wisdom of ages, ready to guide you into a peaceful and restful sleep. In our next segment, we will tie together the lessons and reflections from the Viking world, offering a final, soothing perspective on their enduring impact on history and modern society. Stay with me as we conclude this exploration of their fascinating and complex world. As we come to the close of our journey into the world of the Vikings, let's reflect on the lasting legacy of this extraordinary civilization. The Vikings may have disappeared as a unified force long ago, but the imprint they left on history, culture, and even modern life continues to shape the world in subtle yet profound ways. Their beliefs, their achievements, and the way they lived in the harshest of environments are a testament to human resilience, adaptability, and the power of community. The Viking spirit of adventure and exploration, one of the most lasting aspects of Viking culture, is their spirit of exploration. When we think of the Vikings, the first images that often come to mind are their longships cutting through the waters, raiding distant shores, and settling in foreign lands. The Vikings were, above all else, adventurers. From their home in Scandinavia, they journeyed far and wide, reaching as far east as Constantinople, as far west as Newfoundland in Canada, and even trading with the Middle East. They left an indelible mark on every continent they touched. The sheer scale of their explorations is awe. They didn't simply travel for short-term conquests. They established permanent settlements and trading posts across vast territories. In North America, Viking explorers such as Leif Erikson reached what is now Canada, hundreds of years before Columbus would sail to the Americas. Their settlement at Lonceau Meadows in Newfoundland was an outpost, providing evidence of Viking presence in the New World, long before most modern historians would believe possible. This spirit of adventure still resonates today. The Viking legacy of exploration and discovery is woven into the very fabric of modern Western civilization. It's evident in our fascination with uncharted territories, our lust for discovery, and our constant striving to push the boundaries of what we know. Modern explorers and adventurers still look to the Vikings as a model of courage and determination in the face of the unknown. Their journeys were not just about conquering lands or gaining riches, they were about testing the limits of human capability. The Vikings understood the sea, the weather, and the land in ways that were far beyond their time. They built ships that could navigate the roughest seas, and they charted unknown waters, guided not just by their curiosity, but by their relentless desire to survive, thrive, and conquer. Today, we still see echoes of Viking exploration in our global interconnectedness. Trade routes that link continents, cultural exchanges that span oceans, and the spirit of seeking out new horizons all trace their origins to the Viking explorers who set sail centuries ago. In many ways, the Vikings paved the way for the modern world we inhabit today, a world that continues to embrace the same adventurous spirit they once embodied. The cultural contributions of the Vikings, while their raids and conquests dominate much of the narrative, the Vikings made significant contributions to culture, art, language, and technology, contributions that have lasted well beyond their era. The Vikings were not merely warriors, they were also artisans, poets, and builders. Their art, seen in the intricate designs of their jewelry, weaponry, and even their ships, is some of the most refined of the medieval period. The Viking longship, with its distinctive curved design and intricate carvings, was not just a vehicle of war but a work of art. The symbols etched into these ships often carried deep spiritual meaning, reflecting the Vikings' connection to the divine and their belief in the afterlife. Viking craftsmanship extended beyond ships. They were skilled in metalworking, wood carving, and textile production. Vikings created some of the finest weapons and armor of the medieval world. Using techniques passed down through generations, they were expert blacksmiths, able to forge iron into beautifully detailed weapons, shields, and axes that were as functional as they were aesthetically pleasing. The Vikings' love for intricate craftsmanship was evident in every aspect of their culture, from the runestones they left behind to the weapons they wielded in battle. Moreover, the Vikings were master traders and communicators. Though their language, Old Norse, is no longer widely spoken, many of their words have become embedded in modern languages. English, for example, has absorbed many Viking terms, words related to government, law, and daily life. Words like sky, window, and husband all trace their roots back to the Viking language, showing how their linguistic legacy continues to influence modern society. The Vikings also left behind a rich literary tradition. The sagas, stories of gods, heroes, and warriors, were passed down orally for generations. These tales not only entertained, but provided lessons on morality, bravery, and the values that were central to Viking life. The sagas are not only historical accounts, but also profound reflections on life, death, and the struggle for meaning in an uncertain world. Modern authors, poets, and even filmmakers continue to draw inspiration from these timeless stories, and their influence can be seen in the epic tales of today. The legacy of Viking law and society. Viking legal systems were among the most progressive for their time. The Viking Assembly was an early form of democracy. Free men, including carls and jarls, would gather in open air to discuss important matters, settle disputes, and create laws. The Thing was not only a judicial body, but a cultural institution. It was the place where people came together to resolve conflicts, vote on matters of importance, and ensure that the social order was maintained. It was also a place of direct democracy, where free men had a voice in the governance of their land. In many ways, the Viking Thing foreshadowed the development of modern systems of democracy. The practice of convening in assemblies to make decisions was an early precursor to the parliaments and congresses that would eventually arise in later civilizations. The Viking commitment to justice, fairness, and the protection of rights was seen in their legal codes, which were based on compensation rather than punishment. If someone wronged another, the victim was compensated with goods or money, a system that encouraged resolution and reconciliation over retribution and bloodshed. The Vikings' code of honor and their sense of community were deeply intertwined with their legal practices. Every Viking understood their place within the community and the importance of maintaining balance and fairness. The Viking concept of justice was rooted in the idea of social cohesion, keeping the peace for the greater good of the group. This societal structure influenced not just the Viking world, but also laid the foundation for future legal systems. The idea of community-driven justice, where everyone has a role in maintaining order, continues to resonate in modern democratic societies today. The legacy of Viking law and society. Viking legal systems were among the most progressive for their time. The Viking Assembly was an early form of democracy. Free men, including carls and jarls, would gather in open air to discuss important matters, settle disputes, and create laws. The Thing was not only a judicial body, but a cultural institution. It was the place where people came together to resolve conflicts, vote on matters of importance, and ensure that the social order was maintained. It was also a place of direct democracy, where free men had a voice in the governance of their land. In many ways, the Viking Thing foreshadowed the development of modern systems of democracy. The practice of convening in assemblies to make decisions was an early precursor to the parliaments and congresses that would eventually arise in later civilizations. The Viking commitment to justice, fairness, and the protection of rights was seen in their legal codes, which were based on compensation rather than punishment. If someone wronged another, the victim was compensated with goods or money, a system that encouraged resolution and reconciliation over retribution and bloodshed. The Vikings' code of honor and their sense of community were deeply intertwined with their legal practices. Every Viking understood their place within the community and the importance of maintaining balance and fairness. The Viking concept of justice was rooted in the idea of social cohesion, keeping the peace for the greater good of the group. This societal structure influenced not just the Viking world, but also laid the foundation for future legal systems. The idea of community-driven justice, where everyone has a role in maintaining order, continues to resonate in modern democratic societies today. The modern reverence for Viking culture. The Vikings' enduring legacy extends far beyond the realms of history and archaeology. Today, there is a modern fascination with Viking culture, fueled by popular media, historical research, and a renewed appreciation for their accomplishments. This modern reverence for the Vikings has taken on many forms. Viking-inspired television series and films to modern-day festivals and reenactments that celebrate their way of life. One of the most prominent modern representations of Viking culture is the television series Vikings, which brings to life the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok and his descendants. This series, while dramatized, captures the essence of Viking life, its violence, honor, and the deep ties between family, faith, and society. The show has sparked a renewed interest in Viking history, with millions of viewers around the world eager to learn more about these fascinating people. Viking festivals, held in Scandinavia and around the world, also celebrate their cultural legacy. These festivals often feature reenactments of Viking battles, displays of Viking craftsmanship, and feasts that mimic the traditions of Viking gatherings. In many ways, these festivals allow modern people to step into the Viking world and experience their sense of adventure, camaraderie, and celebration. By participating in these events, people can connect with the past, honoring the Vikings' resilience, creativity, and enduring spirit. Moreover, modern-day historians and archaeologists continue to uncover more about Viking culture, which only deepens our understanding of their world. Excavations of Viking settlements, burial sites, and even everyday objects provide us with an ever clearer picture of their way of life. As technology improves and new methods of excavation and analysis are developed, we can be certain that the Viking story is far from over. Reflection on the Viking legacy. As we conclude this journey through the world of the Vikings, we are left with a profound sense of admiration for a people who, despite the challenges they faced, carved out a world that spanned continents, created lasting cultural artifacts, and built a society grounded in community honor and resilience. Their exploration, their craftsmanship, their belief in the afterlife, and their social structure all speak to the enduring human spirit, that drive to survive, to create, and to understand the world around us. The Vikings were not simply raiders, they were builders, traders, and explorers. They left behind a legacy that continues to resonate, not just in history books but in the cultural fabric of the world today. From the ships they sailed to the stories they told, the Vikings remind us of the power of adventure, the importance of community, and the ever-present struggle between survival and fate. In the quiet of the longhouse, with the fire crackling and the cold wind howling outside, we reflect on the Vikings' journey, a journey of conquest, survival, and profound cultural impact. Their legacy is alive, not just in the artifacts they left behind, but in the values they espoused and the stories they told, which continue to inspire and captivate us today. If you found peace in this reflection on the Viking legacy, perhaps subscribing will bring you more stories to help guide you into restful slumber. May you continue to dream of adventures across distant shores and cultures, of warriors and poets, of tales that have survived the test of time. Thank you for traveling with me into the heart of the Viking world. Your journey has been a reminder that, like the Vikings, we too are shaped by the stories we leave behind.